any child. But we've got to make sure that once they are moved from CBP to Health and Human Services, where there are child welfare experts who run the Office of Refugee Resettlement, it is a much better hospitable environment for these children. But the truth is that's not their final destination. The vast majority of these children, meaning 85 to 90% of them, have a parent or guardian here in the United States. That's where we need to ultimately get them. So we've got to make sure that these kids are not stuck in these large warehouse facilities, but that we're actually reuniting them with their family all across the country.
Why does it take 2.5 years to hear an asylum claim at the moment? And why has this problem not been fixed for decades?
That's the million-dollar question. Part of it is that we need to expand the infrastructure, the legal adjudications, make sure that there are enough immigration judges to address the 1.3 million backlog in terms of hearing these cases. But part of it is also that we need to make sure that these individuals, these families are getting the support while they're having their legal claims adjudicated. Right now, we have a system that invests not just hundreds of millions of dollars, but literally billions of dollars in the private prison companies. And so if we were to actually reallocate that to a more efficient and effective immigration system to assess these claims, I think you would see much more progress and some addressing of this backlog.
Krish, we saw a rare public misstep from Biden over the level of the refugee intake. First saying it was going to go up, then saying it's going to stay at the Trump level, then saying it's going to go up again, but that higher level is actually just a goal. And now this week he says it's a goal that we're not going to reach anyway. So what do you make of all of that?
Yeah, so the president signed something called the presidential determination. It essentially sets the cap or the target. You can view it in a couple different ways. It's important to recognize that that target is both aspirational and inspirational. So part of setting a high goal is to signal to other countries that the United States is attempting to return to its global humanitarian leadership at a time when we see an unprecedented global need. But it is also operational in the sense that when you set that target high, the resettlement community here in the United States can actually use it to rebuild. We've had more than 100 offices shut in the last 4 years across the country. My organization, LIRS, had to close 17 offices. The truth is we can't build this infrastructure overnight, but we have begun the process in the last several months. We could certainly resettle more than the 15,000 that President Trump had set, which was an all-time record low. We're not going to get to 62,500, but there is some symbolism and functionality in setting the number high like that.
Krish, people on the right say that even when an asylum claim is rejected, no one ever gets deported. If someone gets into America, they stay in America unless they commit some horrible crime. Now, do you think that's true?
I don't think it's true, and I think that the numbers bear that out. Once your claim is adjudicated and you do have an order of deportation, the majority of those individuals are returned to their home country or to another destination. I think that one of the issues that we do see is those who come to the country, come to the United States, are deported, who then return once again. And then that cycle happens over and over again. I do think that that is a concern that both sides of the aisle are trying to address, because it's obviously not helpful in terms of having a coherent process. It's also not recognizing that we do need to support more of these individuals and families as they return to their home countries and they reintegrate there.
Krish, based on your personal experience, having come to the United States with your family as a baby, do you think the America of 2021, the America that 47% of which voted for Donald Trump, who built his career on economic and racial resentment, is America as welcoming now to refugees as it once was?
Americans do find themselves at a crossroad, because by some polling, more Americans than ever before believe that immigration is a good thing for the country, 8 in 10 Americans. On the other hand, we have seen that some of President Biden's executive orders have been some of the least favorable of the decisions he has made as president. And so I think part of what concerns me is the fear-mongering how much fiction has been spouted even from the White House, and to what extent Americans believe in that. I know my personal truths, which is that my parents fled a civil war in Sri Lanka and came to the United States when I was 9 months old. And I know that that America was welcoming to us. And I know that my daughter's life will be easier because my own parents' lives were hard. And to me, that's the American dream. I think that is what organizations like LIRS and the communities that support us all across the country still believe in. I'm not going to say that it is easy and we should take any of that for granted, but I do believe that that there is hope, that some of the actions we've seen in the last few months do make me believe that this president will restore the soul of this nation and that America will continue to be a welcoming country.
Finally, Krish, demagogues often play off refugee numbers against asylum seeker numbers. Even though those are two different pools of people, the American public do not seem to see that. So how do you stop Americans freaking out about refugees every time there's a border surge?
We've got to stop conflating one program with the other, one pathway of immigration with another, because they are different. Refugees come to this country as the most extremely vetted of any immigrant population. It is a years-long process. These are individuals who have fled religious persecution, war, violence, persecution for even who they love. And so I think it's important for Americans to be a little bit more savvy and sophisticated, but that's also on policymakers to explain who these immigrants are, why they're important to this country, and why, as a nation of immigrants, where 99% of us trace our ancestry to someplace abroad, that this is critical to our country, that it's not just the right thing to do, but that it's the smart thing to do. That whether it's refugees or other immigrants, that they make our communities safer, they make our economy stronger, and they enrich the culture and diversity of our country.
Krish Amaro-Vignarajah, thank you very much indeed for joining us on Planet America.
Nice connecting. Take care.
The most senior Republican to condemn Donald Trump over his role in the January 6th Capitol Hill insurrection and then vote for his impeachment looks like she's about to pay for it with her job. Wyoming Congresswoman Liz Cheney, the third highest ranked Republican in the House, and daughter, of course, of former Vice President Dick Cheney, faces a party room vote next week, which is expected to remove her from that leadership role. Yesterday, Cheney doubled down in her criticism of Trump with an op-ed in the Washington Post condemning his continued refusal to accept the result of last November's election, writing, "Republicans need to stand for genuinely conservative principles and steer away from the dangerous and anti-democratic Trump cult of personality." Meanwhile, House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy, a staunch defender of former President Trump, rather let the cat out of the bag this week with a hot mic moment talking off-air with a Fox News host.
I think she's got real problems. I've had it with her. It's, I've lost confidence.
Okay, so what happens now?
Well, someone just has to bring emotion, but I assume that will probably take place.
And I assume that's a pretty safe assumption, because Politico reported that McCarthy has lined up Representative Virginia Foxx of North Carolina to introduce that formal resolution next week to give Liz Cheney the flick. And former President Donald Trump has weighed in as well with a statement of his own.
Liz Cheney is a warmongering fool who has no business in the Republican Party leadership. Elise Stefanik is a far superior choice and has my complete and total endorsement.
So we're going to find out next week who wins this particular battle. It's the Bush-era Republican Party versus the Trump era, and so far there are very few signs that Trump is going to lose.
Trump rarely loses amongst Republicans. But can we go back to that Trump statement again? Trump says Liz Cheney is a warmongering fool and that Elise Stefanik is a far superior choice. Fair enough. After all, Liz Cheney only just introduced the Ensuring a Secure Afghanistan Act, which specified a whole list of requirements that must be met before America even considers withdrawing from Afghanistan. And that warmonger's bill was, co-sponsored by Elise Stefanik. And then you have Liz Cheney's pathetic conservative rating of only 78% from the Conservative Union compared to Elise Stefanik's far superior rating of 44%. Okay, let's forget conservatism. What about Trumpism? That's what Republicans really care about these days, and Liz Cheney only voted in line with the Trump position 92.9% of the time, according to 538, compared to Stefanik, who voted in line with Trump a massive 77% of the time. Interesting. So, okay, what's really going on here? Well, there's a pretty big clue from how this latest flare-up began. Democrats described Trump's election conspiracy theories as the big lie. So, much like he tried with the term fake news, Trump tried to rebrand the term to suit him. He wrote, "The fraudulent presidential election will be from this day forth known as the big lie." Pretty transparent stuff. And then Liz Cheney immediately tweeted out, "The 2020 presidential election was not stolen. Anyone who claims it was is spreading the big lie." So she claimed the term right back from him. And then Trump had another go at her, and then she had another go at him. I don't think the issue here is her impeachment vote. I think it's that she doesn't like letting Trump get in the last word. So her stoushes seem to draw a lot of attention, sucking in the entire Republican caucus. That's certainly what Kevin McCarthy hinted on Fox News.
No, there's no concern about how she voted on impeachment. That decision has been made. I have heard from members concerned about her ability to carry out the job as conference chair, to carry out the message. We all need to be working as one if we're able to win the majority.
I think a good example of what I'm talking about was the moment that Cheney probably lost Kevin McCarthy for good. It was back in February. She was asked if Trump should speak at the Conservative conference.
Do you believe President Trump should be speaking, or former President Trump should be speaking at CPAC this weekend?
Yes, he should.
Congresswoman Cheney?
That's up to CPAC.
Now, she could have ended her answer right there if she wanted to. But no, she went on with it, and look how impressed Kevin McCarthy was with her choice.
I've been clear in my views about President Trump and the extent to which following January 6th, I don't believe that he should be playing a role in the future of the party or the country.
On that high note, thank you all very much.
I personally think it's that instinct of Cheney's to back over Trump at every opportunity that's led to the events of this week, John. And of course, Trump goes on about the 2020 election a lot as well, and he also insists on getting the last word in. So I suspect we're going to be seeing many more rounds of this fight, regardless of what position Cheney holds.
Yeah, well, grab the popcorn. It's not just Liz Cheney as well feeling the heat from Trump types. Mitt Romney, the Utah senator, former Massachusetts governor and 2012 Republican presidential nominee, got a very unfriendly reception in his home state last weekend.
Senator Mitt Romney was loudly booed by delegates. He's faced anger and backlash over his votes to impeach President Trump. Let's go ahead and play back what happened.
Okay, nice move there from Mitt saying, hey, what do you think of Biden's first 100 days? While they're already booing. So it sounded like they were booing Biden instead, but unfortunately for him, it was pretty clear very soon that some members of the Utah Republican Party just do not approve of old Mitt.
Please, thank you, show respect. Okay, Senator, thanks, Derek. Thanks, Derek. So, yeah, I understand that I have a few folks that don't like me terribly much, and I'm sorry about that, but I express my mind as I believe is right, and I follow my conscience as I believe is right.
There's no place for conscience, Mitt. Now, this isn't just about relitigating the past, of course, because according to the news site Axios, sources close to former President Trump believe he is increasingly likely to run in 2024 in a bid to return to the presidency, Chaz.
I reckon those sources might be onto something, John, because Trump isn't exactly being cagey about it.
Are you going to run in 2024?
The answer is I'm absolutely enthused. I look forward to doing an announcement at the right time. As you know, it's very early, but I think people are going to be very, very happy when I make a certain announcement. And, you know, for campaign finance reasons, you really can't do it too early because it becomes a whole different thing. Otherwise, I'd give you an answer that I think you'd be very happy with. But so we are looking at that very, very seriously, and all I say is stay tuned.
Very subtle.
Yeah, what a showman. America has a new COVID target this week. 70% of the over 16 population with at least one dose in their arms by Independence Day, July 4th. Currently, about 56% are at least partially vaccinated, but it may not be so easy to reach that target. The numbers getting shots are actually going down at the moment.
When COVID vaccines were first available, demand was high and supply was low. Now there are plenty of vaccines, but demand is dropping off.
And why is there seemingly increasing vaccine hesitancy? Well, this kind of knucklehead stuff doesn't help.
It's almost 4,000 people who died after getting the COVID vaccines. The actual number is almost certainly higher than that, perhaps vastly higher than that. The data we just cited come from the Vaccine Adverse Events Reporting System, VAERS.
Yes, they did, but what Tucker failed to point out is that those deaths reported to VAERS can be made by anyone, and crucially, VAERS is not designed to determine if a vaccine caused a health problem, including death. When hundreds of millions of people, many of them elderly, are getting vaccinated, thousands will die in the next few weeks, but that does not mean that they died from the vaccine. It is just a statistical reality, like the fact that dozens of Tucker Carlson viewers will die watching his show tonight. He didn't cause those deaths, but he's probably going to cause a bunch of deaths in the future. Play the sting again.
Every single week, John, the rate Tucker's going, that's going to be a spin-off show soon.
I'm up for it.
But back to the theories for vaccine hesitancy we're talking about. One popular theory is that the Johnson & Johnson temporary pause a few weeks back affected vaccine numbers. People might have lost confidence in vaccines when they heard there might be a dangerous side effect. That might be what happened. After all, the share of people getting a first dose each day started falling right when the J&J pause occurred. And yes, the J&J vaccine numbers soon fell to zero, and that's where they still are, but also Moderna and Pfizer vaccine numbers started falling at the same time, and they are also still falling. So that is an interesting correlation. However, a major poll found that exactly the same share of people refused to be vaccinated both before and after the J&J pause. So that would suggest the pause did not affect hesitancy. Maybe if you look a bit deeper at those numbers, we can see what's going on. Get rid of the before figures, don't need them anymore. There are only 11% of people left who want to take the vaccine as soon as possible. Whereas there are still 19% of people who expect to take that vaccine either after some other people they know or most other people they know take it. I.e., they're not anti-vaxxers, they're just busy. I think America has until now been basically vaccinating the low-hanging fruit, the really super keen people who are looking for a vaccine. So from now on, it's all uphill, even ignoring the vaccine-hesitant people. Or maybe Americans are just finding it hard to load up Biden's vaccines website, vaccines.gum.
Visit vaccines.gov, vaccines.gum.
Bottom line though, Biden's July 4 target is still not good enough because it's only 70% of adults being vaccinated with one dose, not 70% of the population being fully vaccinated. 70% of the adults is actually 55% of the population. And that's okay in itself because using Israel as a case study, they pretty much beat COVID when they approached 55% of the population, but they were fully vaccinated. So why don't we see how America is really doing, hey, state by state? They've had 2 states so far, Maine and Connecticut. They've only just fully vaccinated 40% of the population, not 55%. And they have 2 states, Mississippi and Alabama, that haven't even reached 25% of the population fully vaccinated so far. So there is a long, long way for America to go still. Although this will help. The FDA is expected to authorize Pfizer's vaccine for 12 to 15-year-olds next week. So that means some more low-hanging fruit will present itself. But On the other hand, they need to get a wriggle on because the Brazilian variant is starting to spread. It's now the second most common variant in America, and it's thought to be twice as contagious as the other variants. And they're also slightly less dominated by the vaccines. The quicker America reaches herd immunity, the better. Oh, by the way, one more big bit of news. America is supporting the waiver of intellectual property protections for COVID-19 vaccines. What that means is that theoretically, generics of the major vaccines can now be produced and the world's poorer countries can get vaccinated a lot faster, which might be bad news for the pharmaceutical companies, John, but it'd be great news for the world, theoretically.
An important distinction between the theory and the reality, of course, because some experts say it could be up to 2 years before those generics are able to be given to anybody. They've got to go through a potentially months-long process with the World Trade Organization to approve this exemption to the IP laws. They've got to get the ingredients, the supplies, they've got to make the vaccines, they've got to decide, do we have to go through a clinical trial process again with the generic vaccines, or are they good to go? So all sorts of potential hurdles in reality.
Absolutely. By the way, one of those countries standing in the way of a WTO approval on behalf of the pharmaceutical companies? Australia. Yes.
Makes you proud. Now, this week, former Senator Bill Nelson was sworn in as the new chief of NASA. The Florida Democrat has had a long association with the Space Administration. As a congressman, he actually flew on board the Space Shuttle Columbia back in 1986.
To have the president and the vice president have this kind of confidence in an old buddy from the Senate is indeed one of the high honors that anyone could have.
78-year-old Nelson was sworn in by Vice President Kamala Harris, who herself this week was made head of the National Space Policy Council. As NASA administrator, though, Bill Nelson has a heck of a job ahead of him if he's to meet the goal of returning to the moon in 2024. And in doing so, NASA has big hopes of making history again. When American astronaut Neil Armstrong became the first person to walk on the moon in July 1969, he seemed to flub his lines.
It's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
NASA claimed it was patchy audio reception. Others suggested Armstrong's Ohio accent was to blame, although Armstrong himself later admitted he made a mistake after 24 hours without sleep. But either way, the word "a" was missing. The line he'd rehearsed was one small step for a man, one giant leap for mankind. Still, there was no doubt it was a man who had stepped onto the moon. The gendered language reflected cultural and linguistic norms of 1969, and the fact that while there were a handful of women in crucial engineering and computational roles at NASA, there were no female astronauts in the Apollo program. In all, 12 humans have walked on the moon, every one of them a man, from Neil Armstrong's giant leap to when Jack Schmitt kicked a moon rock around 2.5 years later.
Go, roll! Look, I would roll on this slope, why don't you?
When it came to women in space, it was the Soviet Union rather than the USA that led the way in 1963.
Down to Earth in a conventional way came the man and woman who'd been in orbit at the same time. And as the first ever space girl, Valentina Tereshkova, here with Colonel Bukovsky, has won a place in history. What a triumph for Russian science.
NASA scientists believed that female hormones would disrupt their ability to fly in space. In any event, there were no female fighter pilots to be trained up to become an astronaut, and it would be another 20 years before the first American woman went into space. In 1983, physicist Sally Ride took off on board the Space Shuttle Challenger.
She was grinning with excitement even before she left the Earth. Even before the crowds here chanted, "Ride, Sally, ride," as Challenger took its supercharged journey into space.
And liftoff of STS-7 and America's first woman astronaut.
Sally Ride still had a lot of ignorance to overcome. She was asked by male mission planners whether 100 tampons would be enough for a 7-day journey.
Liftoff of STS-7 and America's first woman astronaut.
It sure is fun. She even made the work look like fun. joining mission specialist John Fabian in the textbook deployment of 2 communication satellites.
Things are a little different now. In all, 492 men and 64 women have been to space, although that gender imbalance and the assumptions that go with it are still creating occasional problems.
First ever all-female spacewalk has been canceled. That historic walk by 2 NASA female astronauts was scheduled to take place on Friday, but NASA says there's only one spacesuit that fits both women. That only one that size suit will be ready on Friday, so the walk will have to take place with 1 male and 1 female astronaut.
In the 1990s, NASA needed to save money, so they stopped making extra small and small spacesuits, putting a higher demand on the supply of medium-sized suits. As a result, they ran out. In 2017, 45 years after Jack Schmitt became the last man on the lunar surface, he was at the White House to hear President Donald Trump announce plans to return to the moon as a stepping stone to Mars.
What do you think, Jack? Where's Jack? What do you think, Jack? We'll find some other places out there. There are a couple of other places, right?
The new Artemis lunar program is named for Apollo's mythical twin sister.
We're going to the moon to stay by 2024.
And, true to its name, Artemis plans to have a woman be among the next group of humans to walk on the moon.
We are moving very fast. We have a new directive to get the next man and the first woman to the South Pole of the moon in 2024.
There are a lot of technological and budgetary hurdles to overcome before anyone lands on the moon again, but at least they look like they've finally fixed the spacesuit problem.
Christine is wearing a spacesuit that will fit all of our astronauts when we go to the moon.
And joining us now is NASA astronaut Sunita Williams. She spent a